This lesson is on writing to a file from a form. So we're going to use this form information. It's a grocery list. We've seen that before, but last time we just used the grocery lists to display the list back in the browser. This time we're going to keep the grocery list. We're going to write it out to a file on the hard drive. So let's go ahead and put in some information. Carrots, apples, pears, that's enough. I'm going to go ahead and submit the information, and I get information back. Now notice I have two things here. One says writing to a file, and I had items, carrots, apples, pears, and I had another one that says appending to a file, carrots, apples, pears. So I'm going to show you what the difference is between writing to a file and appending to a file. Let's go to some code. Now, this is the HTML code. You've seen this kind of thing before. I've just got item 1, item 2, so forth down to item 7. Nothing else really going on there. So let's go on to the PHP code. I'm going to show you two ways to do this. At the top of the PHP block, I go ahead and I get the document root, the $document root, like I showed you with the writing of the file. We still need to have that root information so we know where our files are. I printed out a heading, writing to file, and then document.root. I'm building up the file name here, document_root, data, and I made up a new name here called G1 text. Okay? Now, if we go back to the file structure, so we can pull that up to our program and go to the WAMP and to the www, we can see, let's get it all the way over here in the there's the W, and let's get to the data bin that I created. Here's the data, okay? These files are here now. That file and that file were actually not here right before I ran the program. There was nothing. So one of the things to first know about this code is when you open a file name with the parameter W, little small w between single quotes, that's opening the file for writing. What it does is it looks at this file name, and if it doesn't exist on the hard drive, it writes it. It writes a blank and an empty one, and does that by default. Now, hopefully, our code is going to go put something in it right after that, but it'll create it for you if it's not already there. If it is there, and this is really important, it wipes it out. If you had a file there with 50,000 lines of information, and you opened it with a W flag, goodbye 50,000 lines. Unless you're going to recreate them in this new program, but they're not there anymore. So be careful with the small w to write a file because it will overwrite the file. Now, we got an open, so we've got a file pointer just like we did for the reading. Now we've got a while loop. I'm using the true technique that I used in an earlier lesson. Here I'm building up the name of the control. It's item 1 through item 7, building it into this variable, and then I'm getting the post on that for each iteration of the loop. So I'll go through item 1s through 7. Now, the same kind of thing before. If the item is empty, I break out of there. Let's look at what I'm really going to do, though. This code is similar. I bump up the counter, I print the item just like you saw it on the window. But now, I'm going to do two more things. I'm going to build something that I'm going to call an output line. This is something I'm going to use to write with. It's really just the item, but look what I have here as well. And it must be in double quotes. It is a \n. That's a new line symbol. You have to put that at the end of every output line you write to the file. If you write one line at a time, like we're going to do here, if you don't do that, everything will run together in one line. And generally, we don't want that. So the \n emulates us hitting the return key if we were just typing up a text file. And it'll make it work properly when we want to read it later. So, once we've built this output line, I now do an fwrite. So fwrite, you have to pass it the file pointer, comma, and then something to write. I could have put all of this in here, but I find this a little cleaner and easier to read. And some of these output lines get complicated, so it's kind of nice to break up the steps and to format your output line in a separate variable and then just pass that variable to the fwrite function. So each time we go through this loop, fwrite is going to write a single line to the file. When we're done with the loop, we'll close the file out, and we can do that with an fclose. and we just pass the pointer to it again. So now that's closed. Let's look at the next thing I did, which was to write it to a different file, but I appended it this time. So I have the appending file. I don't have to get document root again. I did that at the top of the program, so it's still available to me. Now I'm going to write out glist_2.txt and put that in the file name. So let's look at this. I open the file name, and this time I pass a little a as a string. That's a flag that says to open the file for appending. It's going to keep adding data to the end of it. Now, if the file's not there, it will create an empty file for me. The a flag will do that, but it won't overwrite what's there. It'll simply add to the end of it, so we won't lose any data. So, same kind of thing before, set up a counter. Let's go down a bit. Same routine where we build up the name and we get the post and empty and break. And now, I'm printing this out on the window. I'm building my output line. Same exact thing as before. I'm writing the pointer, writing the output line. No difference. The big difference was this A. So let's take a look at these two files now. So in glist1, carrots, apples, pears. Good enough. glist2, carrots, apples, pears. Looks the same to me, but that's because we only ran this program once. Let's go back and run it again. I'm going to go back. I still have the data there again, so this time I'll add something else. Bananas. Submit the information. So it shows here that it's writing all those pieces of data out to the file. But let's look at the files again. glist1, carrots, apples, pears, bananas. Nothing extra there, just what I had in that form. Go to the append file. Now we have the original carrots, apples, and pears, and the new carrots, apples, pears, and bananas. So it appended to the file. And that's a key difference, and it's important to know exactly what you want to do so you don't inadvertently overwrite something you didn't mean to overwrite. Back to the code briefly. Make sure in these while loops that you bump up and manage the counter by yourself, otherwise you're never going to hit this condition where the item is empty and you take the break out of the loop. Remember that an infinite loop will keep clocking in your browser, and that's a sign to close the browser and start looking for an infinite loop. That ends our lesson on writing to files.